Consciousness, gated awareness is something I want to talk about. It's another peculiar thing I've learned about consciousness. In my last consciousness video, I talked about fields of awareness. Now I'd like to invert that and talk about fields of perception. Let me sort of bring into the subject a very present situation, like what is going on with the deportations and ICE and all the uproar about all of this stuff. You wouldn't know it from the news, but the truth is that everyone's favorite president in U.S. in recent U.S. history, at least among liberals, was Barack Obama, right? He is the presidential darling of Western culture. He had 2 to 3 times more deportations than Trump has had. And so for all you know, for all we know, the calamities that we are witnessing, we're getting a front row seat to the calamities of what that ugly process looks like, might have also been happening to the same, if not more, extent during Obama's time as president. But the media had no desire to show it. So what does this mean? This means that, well, first of all, it goes without saying that every second of every day, there are millions of things happening. All sorts of things happening. So much that it would, if you were to be aware of all of it, of all the news, all the possible news going on right now, it would be so jumbled up, you would not be able to form a cohesive narrative of just the time we're living in. And there would be no cohesiveness, no real story to it. And to a large extent, what the news apparatus is it's a system that projects very selectively a synthesis, not even a synthesis, not even that, a curation of reality, tailored to have a very specific narrative effect on the conscious mind of the people. It is the equivalent of the town crier, whose job was to weave a kind of social narrative among the villagers, so that they would kind of get a sense for where they were as a town or as a small kingdom, understand where they were headed, But reality doesn't have that kind of cohesiveness. Reality is very messy. But the news media essentially gives you the illusion that there is a cohesiveness, but it's entirely manufactured. Anyway, the reason I start with that is because our own mind, our own consciousness works in a very similar way. We have this field of awareness, which I mentioned in the last consciousness video, which picks up an enormous amount of data, way more than we believe ourselves to be perceptive of. Not only through our eyes, but through our ears, through our sense of smell, touch. Every single possible sense is picking up an enormous amount of data and giving you things like intuition, for example, and the sense that, oh, this might happen, or this doesn't feel right, this feels dangerous, I'm going to go this direction. There's all kinds of things you're picking up, signals that you're picking up that you're not really able necessarily to process consciously. Sometimes you process them intuitively, or sometimes they make their way down to your subconscious and you pick up on them later on by remembering a dream state. And so this thing we call consciousness is very tiered. It's very tiered, from a kind of super conscious to a present and awake conscious down to a subliminal or subconscious. And so consequently, our consciousness is anything but self-aware. It's almost like it orbits around you. It never actually deals with you. It's always kind of orbiting around this thing you call the self. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me today, where I was at the park. I was watching my daughter play with some other kids, and I was sipping some coffee. And as I was watching them play, my mind wandered into a funny skit, a funny thing that almost like in a Warner Brothers style cartoon of an interaction between two kids that didn't end up so well. And the joke, the gag in this little skit caught me so off guard that I laughed uncontrollably and spit my coffee and made a big mess. And in that moment captures something really special about consciousness, which is that one would have to ask, who is the me that came up with the joke, whom then surprised the me that actually laughed? Because clearly it feels like these were two separate entities. How could I surprise myself, right? There's something about laughter that involves the need for it to be unexpected, right? Something funny happens. And that happened all within me, that entire process. And and there are many, and so I think there are actually different fields of awareness and different fields of perception. Because there I was dealing with a field of awareness that was purely internal. And then the field of perception, what it was projected onto, was the part of me that was receiving the information and reacting to it. And so our consciousness is built in such a manner that whoever I am, is not necessarily really the subject at hand. It is a system that is very similar to a television screen with antennas. It's picking up signals, it's projecting those signals, and those signals are being perceived. So the mechanism that is the antenna, the TV, and the guy sitting in front of the television, that entire system is a big part of the totality of consciousness, but it's compartmentalized into different roles, distinct roles, such that we are at all times a mystery unto our own selves, or just kind of a totally ignored part. Because the mechanism of consciousness fundamentally is there to keep you, number one, keep you alive. That is the most base level of your consciousness. And there's another element of consciousness which is there to get you to move in the right direction. So which actions are you going to take that are going to most benefit you, not only in the present, but in the long term? This is why when you've probably heard of the state of flow that some artists experience, and I've experienced this myself when I used to paint, where you'll get so engrossed in the activity at hand that you'll completely lose track of time and even of your present surroundings, and you'll get lost in the activity itself. your consciousness almost takes a back seat because it's no longer necessary. So in other words, consciousness kind of evaporates once you enter a state of automation, which is another kind of interesting thing about consciousness, that it's the more conscious you are in certain ways might indicate the less activity you're engaging in that you probably should be. So anyway, I thought that'd be an interesting thing to share. Let me know what you think. Have you ever made yourself laugh by wandering off into imaginary funny situations? If so, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.